We're at number 6. Festivals in ancient Athens. This is quite a big presentation, so I get my apologies in straight away. Festivals, not quite as you would understand them. There was less controversy about Billie Eilish headlining. That's my attempt at a joke for young people. I nearly said Franz Ferdinand, which is a real indicator of how old I am these days. Anyway, they liked a festival. Everybody likes a festival. But in this sense, it's a coming together of a community. And for all the reasons on the screen, the Athenians would come together. But at the centre of their festivals was, of course, religion. There were all sorts of festivals: agricultural festivals, festivals of the dead, festivals of fertility, festivals of coming of age, state festivals, festivals of drama. But underpinning all of them, always a religious celebration. So, the first 8 days of each month were given over to festivals. This doesn't mean that nobody worked, by the way. It would be going on in Athens in addition to daily life. There were some festivals where work stopped, but the first 8 days of each month were given over to festivals. Athena's birthday was celebrated on the 3rd of every month, and her official birthday, for those of you who want to pop it into your calendar and maybe moonpig her a gift of some kind. She's very fond of owls, and she appreciates sacrificed cows. See if you can get one for her. Her birthday is on the 28th of June. The first of the month, the Noumenia, the new moon, was supposed to be the holiest day of all. So, agricultural festivals are in honour of Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, and Dionysus, the goddess of wine and viniculture, the growing of vines and grapes. And these were mostly held earlier in the growing cycle. Some of them were restricted just to women, and the idea of festivals just for women is something we're going to come back to repeatedly. Remember, Athenian women spent an awful lot of time indoors. They spent a lot of time sometimes they weren't allowed to go outside without a male chaperone, although that is under some degree of question at the moment. But they didn't have the same liberty and freedom, if those aren't the same idea. They didn't have the same freedoms that modern women have. So the idea of being able to break out of a cycle of restriction through a religious festival was probably very appealing to a lot of women. In the country, these are the gods you pray to for these reasons. And in order to have a good harvest, protect your livestock, you had to worship these gods. And one of the ways to worship them was through festivals. You would have a festival when the crop was brought in. The first fruits of a fruit crop would be offered to the gods. You might bake a loaf to celebrate the new corn. There were also autumn festivals when grain was sown to ensure success, and so on and so on. Festivals and the cycle of agricultural life, reaping and sowing, they went hand in hand. Now, by the way, this presentation goes on forever. It's enormous. In the countryside in December, in order to encourage the soil to be fertile, there was a festival called the Dionysia. Now, this is called the rural Dionysia because there's another Dionysia festival. Okay, and at this festival, there would be a procession of people singing and dancing, carrying wine. There'd be a goat, fruit, and of course, a phallus, a symbol of fertility. There's a lot of chat about phalluses in this presentation. And a dramatic performance by actors who would travel from town to town became associated with the festival. Remember, Dionysus, is the god of the theatre, as well as wine and chaos, and a few other things. So let's go to the Skira. Only women could go. A women-only festival. It was held in Demeter's honour, and into the ground holes were dug, and the women would throw things into them, like piglets. And they would also throw in snakes and of course, reproductions of male genitals made out of dough. The Thesmophoria is another, which is also exclusively for women. It took place 3 months after the Skira, and this time the women would return to, remember those male genitals made out of dough? They would go back and retrieve them and put them on altars. And the women had to be pure for this festival. So in order to ensure they were pure, the women could not have sex for 3 days running up to the festival. So naturally, they ate garlic in order to put off their husbands. The only way in which men were involved in the Thesmophoria was in paying for the Thesmophoria. Again, if you think about the life of a Greek woman, which could be so restrictive, you can understand how these would be quite lively, quite fun to go to. You know, nobody wants to say out loud, but throwing a pig in a hole sounds kind of fun. We come to the city Dionysia. Now, this is one of the two big festivals associated with Athens. There's the city Dionysia and there is the Panathenaea. And we're going to have a look at them both if my throat holds out, because I'm still not very well. So there's a competition, naturally because it's a celebration of Dionysus. We've got poetry, we've got drama, and it all takes place at the Theatre of Dionysus on the southern slope of the Acropolis. This festival is massively important to us as classicists because the plays that were written to be performed at the Dionysia, these are the plays that come down to us. These are the ones we've got, some of them. Many have been lost. But without the plays that were written for the Dionysia, what we know about ancient Greece becomes so much smaller. So we're really indebted to the writers who wrote for this competition. So, as the slide says, the festival provided a showcase for the artistic talents of Athens, and it demonstrated her political supremacy. Because at the Dionysia, the allies of Athens had to pay up their tribute. And then this money would be displayed in the theatre. So, I mean, for Athens' allies, it's kind of humiliating, this festival. But it's a demonstration of power from the state of Athens. There was also a parade of the sons of those killed in war and orphans of the state. Children without parents would be paraded. I'm not sure how that can be a positive thing. Well, this slide's a bit busy, isn't it? I'll let you do your own reading for this. But remember that the Greek calendar is different to our calendar. There are only 10 months for a start, okay? According to tradition, the festival was established after Eleutherai, a town on the border between Attica and Boeotia, had chosen to become a part of Attica. The Eleutherians brought a statue of Dionysus to Athens, which was initially rejected by the Athenians. Dionysus then punished the Athenians with a plague for rejecting his statue. This plague obviously affected the crotches of men in Athens. And the curse on the Athenian crotch was only lifted when the Athenians accepted the cult of Dionysus into the city. And then subsequently, they were reminded of this crotch-related catastrophe by a procession at the city Dionysia every year of citizens carrying phalloi. The guy responsible for the festival, the archon, was elected, and he would choose 2 assistants and 10 curators to organise the festival. There will be a procession on the first day, where everybody from Athens, and indeed the Athenian colonies outside Athens, would march to the theatre of Dionysus. Of course, carrying that wooden statue of Dionysus that had been rejected, the Eleutherian one. And of course, they had to carry phalloi, because you've got to carry phalloi. It's Greece. Excuse me. All sorts of things would be carried, depending on what was going on in Athens at the time. And there are instances when weapons would be carried, gifts would be carried, tribute would be exhibited at the theatre, bulls would be sacrificed in the theatre, so they would be part of the procession. There would be members of the Athenian citizenry dressed in their most expensive clothing. This is a huge procession. You can imagine how dramatic, how impressive, and frankly, how much fun this would be. All these people, so much going on, all part of a festival. The Dionysia goes on for days. So you can understand why this would be such a big deal. So, the procession is called the Pompe. Excuse me, I'm really struggling with my throat here. There would be dithyrambic competitions. A dithyramb is like a drunken song. And these would be competitive. Flute players would be involved. Poets would contribute lyrics. And after these competitions of song, obviously bulls would be sacrificed. And a feast was held using the meat of the bulls. Then afterwards, there is a second procession. Now bear in mind, the second procession happens after the feasting and the wine, and everybody's been whipped up into a bit of a frenzy by this huge festival, this fiesta of fun. So the second procession, the Komos, does look like it might have been kind of chaotic and drunken. The day after that, the playwrights give the titles of their new plays, and the judges select them. It's unknown where the pro-agon, the pre-contest, took place, but after the mid-5th century, it was held in the Odeon of Pericles, the foot of the Acropolis. The Acropole? What's going on there? Who's writing that rubbish? But this announcement of the plays, the pro-agon, was also used in order to, butter up the more influential members of Athenian society. Or maybe even to give praise to citizens who had done especially well over the previous year. Other announcements would be put in because there would be a huge audience waiting for, what this year's play is going to be. Is it going to be another version of Medea? Is it going to be an Antigone? That kind of thing. But other announcements would be put in. And as you can see on the slide, the death of Euripides, the great playwright, was announced at the city Dionysia. So, the theatre has to be purified. The first performance of a tragedy ever. According to tradition, the first performance of tragedy at the Dionysia was by the playwright and actor Thespis, from whom we get the word thespian. And his award was reportedly a goat, a common symbol for Dionysus, and this prize, because it wouldn't be considered a great prize, presumably suggests the origin of the word tragedy. The word tragedy itself, I am told, because I don't really have the Greek for this, means goat song. So after all of the preamble, you've got the ceremony, the festival, the drinking, the procession, all of that stuff. Then the announcement of the plays and, the praise for prominent citizens and goods, all of that stuff. And then you get 5 days of performance. 3 days of tragedy. And the playwrights were expected to present, as I recall, 3 tragedies and 1 satyr play. And a satyr play is like a comedy I guess it's the origin of the word satire. And as the slide says, most of the great plays that we have from ancient Greece come from the Dionysia. The archons and the judges, the prominent, the high status people of Athens and the judges of the competition would be sitting in the front row. Remember, this is a performance of drama, but it is a competition. The final 2 days were given over to song. 5 comic writers would present one play. And it was an honour to win the comic prize at the city Dionysia, even though the Greeks believed that comedy is less valuable than tragedy. It's an interesting point about comedy. You may have noticed that comedy doesn't age as well as tragedy because cultures change. And what is funny to me at the age of 400 years old, what's funny to you, aged significantly younger than that, is different because the culture I grew up in is different to the culture you grew up in. And that's why you have like generational divides when it comes to humour, because the culture changes. And certainly that's why some people cannot find Shakespeare's comedies funny, because they don't understand that world, because it's so different. But tragedy is in some sense more universal. It's constant. You know, somebody murdering their father is tragic 2,000 years ago. It's tragic today. Somebody accidentally sleeping with their mum, it's tragic 2,000 years ago. It's tragic today. But comedy is less permanent. But the other side to that coin, I would argue, is that means that comedy that does endure, comedy that remains funny, that's working a lot harder. It's doing something a lot more impressive. And consequently, maybe comedy that endures is more important than tragedy. Yeah, I digress. Every year at the Dionysia, one play could be restaged, but everything else had to be new. And, you know, it's, I guess, the same as any generation, that we all have our favourite films, we all have our favourite songs, and we like to hear them, we like to see them again and again. And so it would be the case at the Dionysia that there would be well-loved plays that the audience wanted to see restaged, but only one each year. Then there's another procession, a celebration. On the final day, the judges choose the winners, and the winning playwrights win their wreaths. That is a big festival. You know, purely in time terms, it's bigger than Glastonbury. Arguably, I would say in kind of interesting terms, it's bigger than Glastonbury, but let's move on. Panathenaea, held annually on Athena's birthday, which you put into your phone earlier so you could moonpig her a gift. Don't forget. Every year there was a lesser Panathenaea, and every fourth year there was a great Panathenaea. The great Panathenaea, obviously, is a bigger festival. So, the start of the Panathenaea, there's a procession all the way through Athens on a road called the Panathenaic Way. There is a ship mounted on wheels at the front. There is a robe fixed to the mast. Now this robe is called the peplos, and it's going to be used to be draped around a statue of Athena, to dress, to clothe the goddess. The climax of the procession is when they reach the statue of Athena. Excuse me. And they take off the old robe and they put the new robe on. For those of you who can remember, Athena did have a preferred animal to be sacrificed in her honour. It is the cow. And there was a sacrifice of cows. Some went to the goddess, some was used for feasting. There would be recitation of poetry. And there'll be prizes of olive oil, and on these amphora, these jars which contain the olive oil, on one side you'd see Athena, and on the other side would be inscribed, "This is a prize from Athena." Everyone took part in the festival. It's one of the great levelers, the Panathenaic. Metics, foreigners living in Athens, would carry trays. Girls could take part, women could take part. The girls responsible for weaving the peplos actually achieved a degree of status as well, because it was a really big job, an important job. Slaves and non-Greeks could take part in the procession. This is a classic video, isn't it? Then there would be the Panathenaic Games. The Olympics. But not the Olympics. The Olympics are based in Olympia. But very similar. There is a Panathenaic Stadium, which is still in use today. It was done up in time for the recent Olympics in Athens. There was contests of music, sports, equestrian events. For those of you who don't know, events using horses. And then because there were so many events, it lasted more than a week. Like the city Dionysia. These are big festivals. We have a block which explains the program for the games. There are different age categories for the sporting events, for the athletic events, sorry. And prizes were awarded, as you would expect. This is what the program would look like. You don't need me to read you all the way through these, but you can see that this is a mix of, it's not just a sporting festival. We have music, and we have song, and we have poetry in here as well. And we have 7 days of contests, and on the 8th day we have our prizes, feasts and celebrations. And preceding all of that, obviously on day 1, we have the Panathenaic procession. It's a big deal. For those of you who don't know about Athenian music, 2 instruments are worth knowing about. The kithara, which is like a forerunner of the guitar. It looks like a lyre or a harp that's held in against the chest. And the aulus, which is like a recorder with 2 stems, 2 reeds. The athletic events, you can see there for yourself. Pankration, by the way, is like a forerunner of MMA. It's like a mixed martial art. It's a very violent contest, which was incredibly popular. Equestrian events, obviously, because in the age before cars, people were interested in horses. Men would be rewarded with money, and boys and youths would be rewarded with olive oil. Still going here, this is a big one. We come on to the Eleusinian Mysteries, which I think we come on to later on, actually. They're considered a state festival, administered by the Archon, who is like the chief governor. After the settlement of Eleusis, which is in the northeast, just outside Athens, and it came under Athenian control. It took place at night, but it's shrouded in secrecy. We're not entirely sure what happened. But we understand that there was some kind of religious revelation at the center of it. And those who were initiated into the cult of Eleusis, the Eleusinian Mysteries, apparently experienced this divine revelation. We'll come to it. We got there. I got there. Likely there are more questions for this than any other presentation, but I'm going to stop now because I'm dying.